Hey everyone, welcome to Agent Insider. I'm your host, Andy Jewell. Thanks for joining me today. So today I wanted to talk about condominiums and condominium insurance. Condominiums, I think oftentimes people don't really recognize what they are. And I don't want to go too deep in, we're not going to talk legalese or anything like that, but really when you buy a condominium unit, you're one big happy family, or you're one big family, happy or not, with all of those unit owners. And a lot of people don't recognize that. Like, you're buying tenants in common, and you're now in a partnership or an organization. An HOA, homeowners association, or condominium homeowners association, is a company, and you're becoming a partner in owning part of this common area with everybody else that's in that building. And you don't really get control over who those people are. The same way you don't get to control the neighbor who moves in next door in a subdivision, you also don't get to control who buys the unit next door to you or above you or below you. And a lot of people don't think about it that way, but it's not just like an apartment. You are owning this together, and you have voting rights that affect the association as a whole. Like, everyone has to come together and agree, like, we're going to raise our dues by this much. We're going to have this much money in savings to repaint the outside of the building when that time comes, or we're going to have this much money in savings to re-roof when that time comes. And you have to manage it in a way that you're setting yourselves up for success rather than setting yourself up for huge assessments later. So in general, just recognize you guys are in this together. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to recognize that it's not the same as just owning your home with a neighbor next door to you, and you're going to do whatever you want, and he's got to butt out of your business because you're agreeing to certain rules and bylaws when you buy that condo unit and you become part of that association. A lot of people don't understand the difference in the insurance, what types of insurance you need in a condo. So there's two main policies that you're going to end up having as a condo unit owner. First is the master policy. That master policy is typically covering the exterior, and sometimes we'll also cover the interior. And I think we've talked about this in a previous episode about studs in and studs out. It's just kind of generic term. Studs in would be that they're covering everything from the studs in as well. So they're covering the drywall, carpet, countertops. They're covering all of it to where it would be a finished unit. So if something happened, there's a major fire, that whole unit would be covered, and you would just be responsible for your contents or any upgrades that you might have made. The studs out, it says they're just covering the shell. You're going to be responsible for the drywall in. So you're going to have to put the drywall up. You're going to put up all the finishings, the paint, the flooring, the countertops, the cabinets. So it's important to understand who's responsible for what, and that's going to be laid out in your CC&Rs or in bylaws. So it's the governing documents of your condominium association. So it's important to get those. And as dry as it is, you really do need to kind of skim through some of those areas to understand who's responsible for what and what your rights are as a condominium unit owner. So that's the master policy. Master policy also includes some premise liability, and that's covering the association as a whole, but it's not covering you as an individual. So you do need to have your own individual unit owner's policy also. And the unit owner policy is going to cover, it can cover the interior finishes if that's what it needs to, or it can cover just the upgrades. Cause like, hey, you remodel the kitchen, you put in a Wolf stove and a stainless steel appliances and a big hood over it. Cause you're like, hey, I like a commercial style kitchen, and that costs you an extra, $30,000-$40,000. You would need to insure that, because the condominium association policy would not automatically insure that. So there's the upgrade part that you would cover. There's your contents, everything you take with you when you moved. There's personal liability, which would take care of like slip, trips, falls, dog bites, things like that, where you become liable for damages to others. And then there's also loss of use, which would pay for you to stay someplace else while your unit is repaired or rebuilt. So it's important coverage to have, they call it an HO6 or condominium unit owner's policy. So I highly recommend that. And then you really do need to work between your insurance agent and the bylaws to understand what coverages you need to have in there. One of the things I would also recommend is to make sure that you understand what your deductible is on the condo unit policy. So as the insurance market has gotten a little bit crazy, it's gotten very hard, and we call it a hard market because it's hard to place the policies and the premiums go up. And carriers are not looking to gain more business. They're actually, in some instances, chasing business away. So we're seeing that happen right now in condominiums, in apartment buildings. And so to combat some of those rising prices, we're seeing a lot of condominium associations going with much higher deductibles than what they would have traditionally had. So you might see it's common now to see a $25,000 to $50,000 deductible on condominium association policies. Because of that, because of those deductibles being so high, you need to make sure, even if your association is covering the studs in, so they're covering the interior finishes, but if they're carrying a $25,000 deductible and your dishwasher leaks and wrecks the floor in your kitchen and dining room, and you go, hey, that's a $10,000 replacement for me. I don't have that much money just sitting in the bank. I need to open a claim. The association policy is not going to help you, even though technically it probably would fall under the coverage of the association policy because they're covering the interior part of the unit. Because it's under their deductible, it won't respond. And in that case, your unit owner policy would respond. So you would want to have building coverage, even if you're covering the master policy is covering the interior of the finishes of the unit. You would need to have that HO6 policy, your unit owner policy, to have as much building coverage of at least what the deductible is of the association. Because if the claim only affects one unit, typically, and this is in Washington, and condo laws can be different in different states, but typically if the damage only affects one unit and it's below the deductible of the association, then it becomes the responsibility of that unit owner. Now, this leads into another issue that's an important coverage. It could affect multiple units, and it could become an assessment. So we'll use freezing pipes because that's something that's common and it's covered under insurance. So the condo association policy carries a high deductible. So maybe they're carrying a $50,000 or maybe even $100,000 deductible on water because they're trying to offset the increasing premiums. Then they have a freezing event, causes damage to multiple units. And so now they're going to have a loss assessment that's going to be assessed out to every unit owner in the association to cover that deductible. So they go, hey, this is actually a $500,000 claim, but we have a $50,000 deductible. We have a $100,000 deductible on water. And so we're going to assess each of our unit owners a percentage of that deductible. So everybody's going to pay, if we have, 10 unit owners and it's a $50,000 claim, every unit owner has to pay a $5,000 assessment to pay for the deductible. If you have loss assessment on your policy, on an HO6 policy, that would be covered. So now that loss was assessed out to everybody, and you can turn in a claim now to your HO6 and say, hey, I don't want to pay this out, and I have loss assessment on my policy. So now your own policy pays it out. And this actually makes a lot of sense because you can save money on the big policy, and then each individual unit owner, as long as you're carrying proper coverage, has protection against it on their individual policies. So you might even carry a high deductible like $100,000 and say, hey, we're going to assess this. We're going to carry a huge deductible because we don't want to turn claims in on the association policy as a whole. And then we're going to assess that deductible out in the event of a claim. And each unit owner needs to carry a high loss assessment value. So that way they'll have resources to be able to pay that assessment. So either they're going to know like, hey, if there's a claim, we're going to assess this out and you have to have this in reserve, or you need to carry insurance to make sure that you can pay for this. So it's actually a great strategy for associations to use to help leverage their insurance cost on the master policy and not expose the association resources, or the money that they've been saving up for the roof doesn't get exposed to having to pay out the deductible in the event of a loss, because now they can just assess out that deductible. So if that's something that your association is doing, you just make sure you're aware of it so that you carry the proper insurance on your unit policy, so that you're not caught off guard and having to pay a $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 assessment out of pocket that could be covered easily on your unit owner policy for, maybe $10 a year. So anyways, so that's just be aware of how your master policy is working, what those deductibles are, what the bylaws and CC&Rs are saying of who's responsible for what. And then that way you can properly protect yourself with a condo unit owner's policy. And I do think it makes sense as a whole for those for associations more and more to be pushing higher deductibles and pushing losses that are only affecting an individual unit to that unit owner, instead of the whole association being punished because one unit owner let their bathtub overflow and damage their unit. So because that's when the association policy goes up, when you have a claim and you're going up, 20, 30% on your master policy, everybody in that association is going to be affected by that, because dues are going to have to go up to offset the cost of the increase in that insurance premium. So high deductibles on the master policy make a ton of sense, but then make sure that your unit owner policy is protecting you as an individual by having enough building coverage and loss assessment to go along with that. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. If you have more questions about that, obviously talk to your local agent or shoot us an email. I'd be happy to do a follow-up on this. My email address, theagentinsider@gmail.com. That's theagentinsider@gmail.com. And hope you guys have a great weekend. Until next time.